That's how it all started. One little typo, one random number, one harmless message that should have gone nowhere. But what if I told you that a single misfired text can unlock something more than conversation? Something deeper. Something life-changing. If you've ever believed that fate works in mysterious ways or wondered if love could really find you when you're not even looking, then this story is going to hit you in a place you didn't even know was waiting to be touched. And I promise you this, you're going to get the answer you came here searching for, and more. Because by the time you reach the end of this video, you'll understand how a stranger became a soulmate. And why their story might just change the way you look at your phone forever. Now, before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the universe was trying to send you a sign, but you just didn't know how to read it? Maybe it was a moment so random it couldn't possibly mean anything. And yet, it stayed with you. You kept replaying it, like your soul knew it mattered, even if your mind didn't. That's exactly what happened to her. She was just a regular woman. Ordinary job, regular morning routine, scrolling through messages with one eye open, coffee in hand, late for work as always, when she typed out a message meant for her best friend. A message venting about a terrible date she'd had the night before. She hit send. And didn't notice the wrong number. Not yet. But when the reply came in, kind, curious, and completely unexpected, something in her paused. And here's where I want you to really lean in with me. Because this wasn't just a random reply. It was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could have seen coming. I'm telling you this not just as a narrator, but as someone who believes in the invisible strings that pull two people together when it's meant to be. You might have come to this video out of curiosity, but trust me, you're staying because your heart knows there's something here for you too. And no, this isn't one of those cheesy, he fell in love with her instantly, kind of stories. This isn't about instant attraction or butterflies in the stomach. This is about something slower. Deeper. A connection that builds message by message, day by day. One that shows us how love doesn't always shout. It sometimes whispers. And if you've ever felt like you were alone in your search for love, or like the modern world of dating apps and ghosting and awkward first dates has drained all the magic out of meeting someone real, this story is going to give you hope again. Let me bring you into her world. Her name is Emily. She's 32. She works as a freelance graphic designer, living in a cozy little apartment in Portland, Oregon. Not quite where she thought she'd be at this stage in life, but she's making it work. Like most of us, she's a mix of contradictions, strong, but secretly craving softness, independent, but quietly wondering if maybe she's missed her shot at finding the one. And on that rainy Wednesday morning, she was just trying to get through her day. No expectations. No romance. Just another routine vent to her bestie about a man who had shown up to their first date late, distracted, and clearly more in love with his phone than with the idea of getting to know her. Emily had had enough. So she sent a brutally honest message, something like, "Last night was a disaster. If I ever let you convince me to go on another blind date again, please just slap me." She laughed, pressed send, and forgot all about it, until her phone buzzed a few minutes later. But instead of her best friend's usual snarky comeback, the message read, "Ouch. That bad, huh? Want to tell me what went down?" Her brow furrowed. That wasn't her friend's tone. And that wasn't her friend's number. Here's where the magic begins. And I need you to pay close attention because this is what sets everything in motion. She could have ignored it, blocked it, chalked it up to digital static in a world full of noise. But something about the reply made her pause. It was unexpected, kind, not creepy, curious, not invasive. She stared at the message for a while, her thumb hovering over the screen. And then, against all better judgment, she replied. What followed was a conversation that stretched into hours. Then days. Then weeks. Two strangers, connected by nothing more than chance. And yet something real began to form. I know what you might be thinking. Was it a scam? Was he pretending to be someone he wasn't? Was she getting played? Those questions will all be answered in this video. But what I want you to focus on right now is that feeling. The one you get when someone sees you without even knowing you. That's what started to happen here. His name, she later learned, was Ryan. He was from Seattle. 35. Worked in software engineering, but wasn't your typical tech bro. There was a softness to him. A depth. A warmth in the way he typed his words that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. But she didn't know him. Not really. And still, there was something undeniably magnetic about the way he listened, the way he responded, not just with sympathy but with understanding. As if he'd been there too. This is the part of the story where their connection begins to deepen, but the questions grow louder. Who was he really? Why was he so invested? And what did this mean for a woman who had all but given up on real love? As you watch this video, I want you to stay with me, because every twist in the story is going to pull you deeper into something that feels like it's unfolding in real time. You'll hear the messages they sent. You'll feel the moments where trust began to build, and where doubt started to creep in. Because nothing this real ever comes without risk. And no heart opens without fear. So stay with me. Don't click away. Because we're just getting started. And right when you think you know where the story is going, everything changes. Emily makes a decision. One that will either bring her closer to the love she never expected, or shatter everything before it even begins. And just when she finally agrees to meet him in person for the very first time, when her heart is racing and the tension is unbearable, he doesn't show up. She stood there in the coffee shop, staring at the empty table in front of her, the seat that should have held him still untouched, as if time hadn't dared move forward until he arrived. The rain outside hadn't stopped since morning, and each drop tapping against the glass felt like a countdown to a moment she never imagined would come. Except now, it wasn't coming at all. Emily clutched her phone a little tighter, eyes scanning the screen for any sign of a message, a missed call, a last-minute explanation, but there was nothing. Silence. The kind that sinks into your chest and makes it hard to breathe. She wasn't the kind to make bold moves. Not anymore. But something about Ryan, this stranger who had slipped into her life so unexpectedly, had made her believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe hadn't forgotten about her after all. And now, with her heart caught somewhere between panic and disappointment, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd been foolish to trust what felt so real behind a screen. She waited 30 more minutes. Every few seconds she checked the door, her reflection catching her off guard in the window, making her look like someone else. Someone hopeful, vulnerable, and visibly shaken. Her coffee had long since gone cold, but she barely noticed. The couple at the table behind her laughed, clinking their mugs together like a scene from a romantic comedy, the kind she used to love but now avoided. As she stared at her phone, her mind replayed everything. Every message, every shared secret, every late-night conversation that made her feel less alone. She wasn't naive. She'd seen catfish stories on YouTube, read about women who got scammed or played, watched TikToks about girls falling for men who ghosted them the second it got real. But Ryan hadn't felt like that. He was different. He had asked her about her dreams, not just her day. He remembered things. He sent voice notes that felt like hugs. There was depth in his voice, a kind of calm assurance that made her feel like maybe she could let go of the walls she'd been hiding behind for years. But now it was like none of it had ever happened. She finally left the coffee shop just as the rain turned heavier, drenching her before she made it back to her car. As she sat behind the wheel, soaked and motionless, her phone buzzed, and her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. But it wasn't him. Just a weather alert. Thunderstorm warning. Figures. She started the car, drove through streets that looked blurred by more than just rain, and tried not to let the lump in her throat rise any higher. Still no word. Nothing from Ryan. She didn't know whether to feel hurt, worried, or angry. And that, more than anything, terrified her. Because the truth was, she cared. She cared more than she wanted to admit, more than she ever should have for someone she'd never even seen in real life. But hadn't he felt real? Hadn't the connection been real? The next day, Emily barely got out of bed. She kept checking her phone like a ritual, like he might finally offer some kind of explanation that would make this whole thing make sense. But there was only silence. Her best friend Katie, the one she had meant to text that night weeks ago, called twice, then texted, "Where have you been? Tell me everything." But Emily didn't reply. Not yet. She wasn't ready to explain something that didn't even feel like it had an ending. Just a sudden, sharp pause. Instead, she scrolled through their messages, reading them over and over, searching for signs she'd missed, clues that this wasn't what it seemed. Everything had felt so genuine. Their talks about music, their shared love for slow Sunday mornings and long walks with no destination. The night he told her about his mom passing away from cancer 5 years ago, and how he'd never really talked about it with anyone until her. The way he'd typed, "You're easy to talk to, Emily." Like coming up for air. That wasn't fake. It couldn't be. But then again, maybe she didn't know him at all. Across the city, Ryan sat in front of his laptop, a glass of untouched water next to him, the unread message from Emily still glowing softly on his screen. "I'm here. Sitting at the table by the window. Where are you?" It had been sent yesterday. He'd read it 100 times, each time feeling the ache twist a little deeper. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he didn't reply. He couldn't. Not yet. How do you explain to someone that the version of you they've fallen for is only half the truth? How do you confess that you've been keeping something from them, not because you wanted to lie, but because you didn't know how to be seen without the parts you tried so hard to hide? Ryan hadn't meant for any of this to happen. He'd replied to that accidental message on a whim, just curious, not knowing it would lead to conversations that felt like therapy, like poetry, like he was finally being heard. And as it grew, as she opened up and he did too, something inside him changed. He wanted to be the man she saw. But the problem was, he wasn't sure he could live up to it. He wasn't lying about the important things. His name, his job, his love for jazz and old bookstores. But there were details. Ones he'd edited, softened, blurred. Things about his past, his family, about the way his last relationship ended in a storm of betrayal and lawsuits. Things he wasn't proud of. And when it came time to finally meet her, to step out from behind the screen, the fear became paralyzing. Not fear of rejection, but fear of ruining something that had finally felt pure. What if she saw him and didn't feel the same? What if she felt cheated? What if the real version of him wasn't enough? But what Ryan didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Emily wasn't looking for perfect. She was looking for real. Back in Portland, Emily started to write out a message, something like, "You could have just told me. Whatever it is, I would have understood." But she deleted it. Rewrote it. Deleted it again. The not knowing was worse than anything he could have said. But as the days passed and still no word came, she began to wonder if this chapter of her life would remain unfinished. Her friends noticed the shift in her mood, but she brushed it off, claiming she was just busy. Work got done, bills got paid, but her spark was dimmer. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. It didn't feel over. Not yet. Then one night, almost a week after the missed meetup, a new number appeared on her screen. It was a message, short and cryptic. "I need to explain. Can we talk?" No name. No photo. But something told her it was him. Her pulse quickened. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she stared at it for what felt like hours. Should she let him back in? Did she want answers, or closure? But before she could decide, another twist unraveled. Her best friend Katie, tired of being kept in the dark, did a little digging. It started as curiosity, concern for Emily's silence. But what she found sent a chill down her spine. She recognized Ryan's voice, on a podcast episode. A relationship-themed podcast where guests remained anonymous, sharing stories of past heartbreaks. In one episode, a man who sounded just like Ryan described an eerily familiar situation. A deep connection with a woman he met through a text, someone he felt was the one, but who he ghosted before they ever met. Katie sent the link to Emily with the message, "You need to hear this." As Emily listened to the voice she knew so well, her heart pounded. The words were hauntingly close to her own story. The way he described her, not by name, but by essence, it was her. There was no doubt. But at the end of the podcast, the host asked, "Do you think you'll ever reach out and tell her the truth?" And his voice cracked as he replied, "I want to. I just don't know if I deserve to." Emily closed the app, her hands trembling. The truth was out there, but it wasn't the full truth. Not yet. And now she had a choice. Confront him? Walk away? Or follow the trail of unanswered messages, missed moments, and invisible ties that were somehow still pulling them together? Because as much as she wanted to let go, her heart hadn't. And just as she was about to send him a message, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. Of the coffee shop. The exact table she had been waiting at. Captioned, "I was there. You just didn't see me. Would you like me to continue this story into the next segment?" Emily stared at the photo, her breath catching in her throat. It was the coffee shop, unmistakably the same place where she had waited for what felt like forever, hoping, doubting, and slowly unraveling. The table was clearly hers, the same little vase with half-wilted flowers, the window streaked with rain behind it. But the photo wasn't taken from the seat opposite her. It was taken from across the street, maybe even from a parked car. The realization hit her like ice water. He had been watching. She scrolled back to read the caption again, her heart pounding louder with each second. I was there. You just didn't see me. Suddenly, the disappointment she'd carried for days twisted into something else. Confusion, maybe even fear. What did he mean by that? Why would he be there and not come in? Why watch her from a distance? A part of her wanted to believe it was nervousness, that maybe he just couldn't go through with it. But another part of her, the part that had spent the last week obsessing over every silence and every red flag, began to wonder if this wasn't something deeper. Something darker. She didn't respond to the message. Not immediately. Instead, she did what most of us would, she Googled. She searched every podcast episode, every Reddit thread about missed connections and accidental texts that led to romance. She watched videos on YouTube titled, He Ghosted Me, Then Came Back, When a Stranger Knows Too Much, and I Fell in Love with a Liar. The trending stories weren't just about heartbreak. They were about deception. Emily didn't want to believe that Ryan was one of those men, the ones who build digital castles out of lies, who charm their way into your heart with words but vanish the second reality knocks. But that photo, it chilled her. There was intimacy in it, yes, but also secrecy. A kind of detachment that felt like he had been there for her, but not with her. And that was the difference. She needed answers. Not just for closure, but for her own peace of mind. Meanwhile, across state lines, Ryan sat in his dim apartment, the glow of his phone illuminating his face as he waited for a reply. He hadn't planned on sending the photo. He had sworn to himself that he'd let it go. But the guilt had been growing louder by the hour. The podcast appearance wasn't supposed to come out yet. He had recorded it months ago during a moment of emotional vulnerability. He never expected it to go public before he had a chance to make things right with Emily. And now, with the episode out, the truth was bleeding into places he couldn't control. The thought of her hearing his voice on a stranger's show, finding out his secrets from a podcast instead of from him, it made his skin crawl. But still, he hadn't been able to go inside the coffee shop that day. He had stood across the street, frozen by fear, afraid she would look at him and see everything he was trying so hard to leave behind. He wasn't the man he had once been. At least, he hoped he wasn't. But when you've spent years hiding behind half-truths and masks, it's hard to know what parts of yourself are still real. What neither of them knew, though, was that someone else had been watching too. Unbeknownst to Ryan, a former acquaintance from his past, a woman named Tessa, had also heard the podcast. Tessa wasn't just any ex. She was part of the story Ryan had carefully edited out when talking to Emily. Tessa knew things. About his previous life, about the lawsuit he had brushed over in passing, about the version of himself he had buried beneath smooth words and late-night conversations. She had once been where Emily was, enchanted, hopeful, certain she had found someone rare. But Tessa's experience hadn't ended in romance. It had ended in betrayal, in legal fees, in months of therapy and a restraining order that Ryan had managed to get lifted with a well-crafted apology and a clean record. Now, hearing his voice again, spun into yet another almost love story, reignited something in her. Not anger. Resolve. She wasn't going to let someone else walk blindly into the same pain. Especially not someone who sounded, in every word Ryan spoke on that podcast, like she genuinely believed he had changed. Emily's phone buzzed again that night. Another message, but not from Ryan. This one was from an unknown number. The profile photo a blank circle. The message read, "If he told you everything, you wouldn't still want him. Ask him about Tessa." No explanation. No follow-up. Just a name that meant nothing to Emily. Yet. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She didn't want to spiral. But the unease was becoming impossible to ignore. She copied the name, Tessa, and ran a search. There wasn't much, but there was an old LinkedIn, some blurry tagged photos on Facebook, and then a court document. It was archived, buried deep behind paywalls and poor formatting, but it was real. And Ryan's name was in it. Her stomach turned. Suddenly, the perfect messages and dreamy voice notes started to feel like set pieces. A performance. Emily didn't sleep that night. She just sat at her desk, the blue light of her screen casting shadows on her face, combing through everything again. Rereading. Re-listening. She wasn't sure who to believe. She wanted to believe the man who had comforted her through her loneliness. The man who had said, "You make me feel like I can be better." But what did that mean? Better than what? Meanwhile, Ryan had begun typing a long message to Emily. One that started with, "I wasn't honest with you," and spiraled into the kind of raw vulnerability he should have offered her from the beginning. He confessed about Tessa, about the lawsuit, about the person he used to be. He explained how he had spent the last 2 years in therapy, trying to rebuild, to stop running from the guilt he carried like armor. He told her he never meant to hurt her, that his fear of not being good enough had kept him from walking into that coffee shop, even though his heart had screamed at him to do it. He admitted everything, except one detail. The real reason he replied to her accidental message in the first place. Because it wasn't entirely by chance. And just as Emily was about to reply to the cryptic message about Tessa, another notification came through. This one wasn't a message. It was a video. Sent from an anonymous account, with no text. Just a play button. As she clicked it, the screen showed footage from that day at the coffee shop. A wide shot, taken from across the street, clearly captured from inside a vehicle. The camera slowly zoomed in on Emily at the table. Waiting, glancing at the door, sipping her coffee. Then it panned slightly to the left, revealing Ryan, standing on the sidewalk. Watching her. Not moving. Not trying to go in. Just staring. Then, in the last few seconds of the video, another person appeared. Tessa. Standing behind Ryan. And she was filming him. Emily slammed her laptop shut, her pulse racing. Something was deeply wrong. And this wasn't just about love anymore. Would you like the next section to move closer to the climax or explore Tessa's motivations and backstory more deeply? Emily's mind was spinning, unable to process what she had just seen. The grainy footage burned itself into her memory. Ryan standing silently, haunted, maybe even paralyzed by something far more complex than fear. And Tessa, not confronting him, not speaking, just standing behind him with a phone raised like a witness gathering evidence. That wasn't the behavior of a vengeful ex or someone looking for closure. It was deliberate. Calculated. Emily knew then that this story wasn't just about a failed romance or an awkward misconnection. It was a web, and she had just stumbled into the middle of it. Still, her heart wasn't ready to fully let go. So, she sent one message. Short. Simple. I saw the video. We need to talk. Within minutes, Ryan responded with a single sentence that chilled her more than anything. I was hoping you'd say that. There's something you don't know. They agreed to meet the next day, in a public place, and this time, Emily brought her best friend along. Just in case the mystery unraveled into something she couldn't handle alone. When Ryan walked into the cafe, he looked different. Not just in his face or his posture, but in his eyes. There was no pretense, no charm, no attempt to win her back. Just quiet urgency. They sat down, and for the first time, he told her everything, without editing the truth to protect himself. Ryan admitted that the original text, the accidental message that had sparked their entire connection, had not been random. He had seen her once before, months earlier, at a bookstore near his therapist's office. She was talking to the cashier about a poetry collection, laughing about how it reminded her of her grandmother. Something about her voice had stuck with him. He didn't approach her that day, but her name had been printed on the back of the loyalty card she left behind. He had kept it, unsure why. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of something deeper. Weeks later, when he found the card in his jacket and looked her up, he had no plan. He just wanted to say hello. But instead of being honest, he chose to send a message that made it seem accidental, a way to create a connection without the risk of rejection. And it worked, until it all unraveled. Emily sat in silence, absorbing it. The lie felt smaller now, though still wrong. But the rest of his story turned her discomfort into dread. Ryan confessed that Tessa had been following him for weeks. After the podcast dropped and his name started circulating online again, she had re-emerged, not to reconnect but to expose him. He showed Emily the emails, some threatening, some cryptic, along with screenshots of burner accounts she had used to comment on the podcast's YouTube video, calling him a fraud and accusing him of being dangerous. But what shocked Emily most was a printed legal letter Tessa had sent to the podcast producers, threatening to sue if they didn't take the episode down. According to Ryan, Tessa wasn't interested in warning people. She was trying to erase him. Not just from the internet, but from any opportunity to rebuild. Emily's first instinct was still skepticism. But then Ryan showed her the final piece of evidence, a series of therapy notes his counselor had written, confirming the timeline of his recovery, his documented attempts to seek help, and the trauma he carried from his own past, things not even Tessa had known. Emily's friend leaned over and whispered, "I think he's telling the truth." And Emily believed it. Not because she wanted to, but because for the first time everything made sense. But there was still one more twist to come, one that neither of them saw coming. Later that night, Emily received another message from the same anonymous number that had warned her before. This time, it was a voice memo. She played it on speaker, expecting another threat or warning, but instead, it was a woman's voice, shaky, tired, and familiar. "I know he probably told you everything," the voice said. "But he doesn't know everything about me either. I wasn't trying to ruin him. I was trying to protect someone else. My sister dated him before I did. She was never the same after they broke up. She left the country. He doesn't even remember her, because he never really saw her. Just like he almost didn't see you." Emily stared at the screen, stunned. It was Tessa. And what she said next changed everything. "But watching you too. I realized maybe he's trying this time. I just couldn't let him charm his way into another person's heart without consequences. You deserve to know the whole truth. I'm sorry I scared you." The message ended, leaving a heavy silence behind. Emily didn't respond. She didn't know what to say. She looked over at Ryan, who was sitting beside her, watching her reaction with quiet dread. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear." And she believed him again, but this time, it wasn't blind faith. It was cautious trust. The kind that comes not from fairy tale beginnings, but from weathering a storm together. In the days that followed, Emily didn't cut him off. But she didn't dive back in either. They met for coffee. They talked like people who had been through a fire and weren't quite sure if the smoke had cleared. She watched his actions, not just his words. Slowly, the weight of the mystery gave way to something quieter. Something honest. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And maybe that's what love really is. Not a perfect text sent by accident, but the choice to keep showing up, even when the story gets messy. Even when the past isn't what you expected. Even when the truth hurts. So the next time you get a text from a stranger, think twice before brushing it off. It might be a scam. It might be nothing. Or it might be the start of a story you never saw coming. Just like Emily's. And that is where it all began. Would you like a recap version of this story for a YouTube short or trailer?